Welcome to This Explainer. If you've ever found yourself wondering how a story from the first century is somehow captivating millions of modern viewers right now, well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of a massive media phenomenon. We're going to look at exactly how the multi-season series, The Chosen, takes ancient texts and turns them into a deeply relatable, character-driven psychological drama. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start off by looking at the phenomenon itself, then explore their plausible fiction method. From there, we'll hit the historical context, dive into some modern reflections, and wrap things up with the absurdity of grace.
First up, let's talk about the phenomenon called The Chosen.
So traditional biblical films usually have, maybe 2 hours to rush through an immense amount of ground. But The Chosen does something entirely different. 7. That's the number of planned seasons for this show. And by aiming for 7 full seasons, the creators unlock their absolute greatest weapon, which is narrative breathing room. I mean, they literally have dozens of hours at their disposal. This lets them explore the complex, deep psychological backgrounds of these characters long before they ever even meet Jesus. We actually get to see who these people were when they were just ordinary folks, just struggling to survive.
Moving right along to Section 2, the plausible fiction method.
Now, to actually fill those dozens of hours of television, the creators rely on a really fascinating framework called plausible fiction. They aren't trying to rewrite the source text here. Instead, they're creatively filling in the blank spaces so that the human reactions make complete psychological sense. The show actually frequently opens with a disclaimer reminding us it's a historical drama inspired by the Gospels, encouraging folks to read the original texts. But this plausible fiction method gives the writers the license to create things like campfire conversations, specific family disputes, or secret meetings. It builds out this rich apocryphal world that tracks both historically and emotionally.
There's a really active contrast happening here. On one side, we've got what we're totally used to seeing. Traditional adaptations focus strictly on theological messages, rapid plot progression, and characters portrayed as perfect, glowing saints. But on the other hand, The Chosen hits us with gritty reality. The disciples aren't just names on a page anymore. We see Simon Peter as a desperate fisherman literally drowning in debt to Rome, trying to cheat the system just to save his family. And we get a highly grounded, very down-to-earth portrayal of Jesus. We see him laughing, joking around with his friends, dancing at weddings, nursing his own injuries, and, just physically exhausted, simply making his bed after a long day of healing massive crowds. It's just a striking focus on flawed humanity.
Next up is Section 3, slow pace in historical context.
Because the narrative definitely doesn't take place in a vacuum. The show drops us directly into a political boiling pot. It meticulously details the Jewish cultural roots, like we see the strict observance of the Sabbath, prayers spoken in Hebrew, preparations for feasts, and traditional garments with fringes. It makes it undeniably clear that Jesus and his followers were practicing Jews. And on top of all that, we really feel the crushing weight of the oppressive Roman military occupation, the widespread corruption, and those intense factional tensions between groups like the Zealots and the Pharisees. Having this deep context perfectly explains why these new teachings weren't just brushed off as some new philosophy, right? They were viewed as highly dangerous and subversive by the elites of that time. And this slow burn format allows events to actually breathe. For example, organizing the famous Sermon on the Mount becomes this massive, multi-step logistical nightmare. In a standard film, that's just one scene. In The Chosen, it takes up an entire season of buildup. We see the word spread, the massive crowds gather, and the disciples totally panicking over logistics. Like, how do we feed all these people? How do we keep everyone safe? We even see Jesus and Matthew sitting down, literally drafting and crossing out notes for the sermon outline. Plus, when miracles do happen, the show doesn't just move on. It explores the social and political shockwaves. We see the family's reaction, the religious authorities totally panicking, and the compounding problems that follow. Miracles actually have real-world consequences here.
Let's transition over to Section 4, Mirror to Modern Problems.
Now we're shifting from the macro-historical lens down to a deeply intimate micro level. Why didn't you heal me? In the 3rd season, we encounter this absolutely devastating question from little James. And what's interesting is the actor who plays him has a real-life physical disability and walks with a limp. In the narrative, little James is given the power to heal others, but he approaches Jesus with tears in his eyes and asks this heartbreaking question. And Jesus doesn't just offer some cliché about, having more faith. Instead, he tells him that praising God and serving others while carrying the burden of unhealed pain is a unique witness that not even angels can provide. It perfectly captures the modern concept of theodicy, that agonizing question of why good people suffer and why a higher power doesn't always intervene. It's just a deeply validating moment for anyone out there carrying chronic pain.
Looking at how this plays out, the series absolutely refuses to demand perfect saints. Take Peter, for instance. While he's away serving, his wife suffers a miscarriage. And man, he experiences a profound crisis of faith. He is furious. Like, why would God care for strangers but let his right-hand man suffer? It all culminates in this incredible scene on a stormy sea where Peter refuses to pray and instead just screams his anger at Jesus over the roaring waves. And Jesus doesn't scold him. He lets him walk on the water, embraces him, and just lets him cry. It completely shatters that myth of the always obedient saint and validates the raw, messy reality of modern grief and anger. Then consider Nicodemus. He's a wealthy, highly respected intellectual celebrity. He meets Jesus secretly on a roof, realizing Jesus is the truth. But Nicodemus weeps because following that truth means losing his career, his status, and all his security. It's a perfect mirror to the modern intellectual crisis, where societal and career pressures stop people from taking a leap into the unknown.
And then we have the redemption of Mary Magdalene. When we first meet her, she is at absolute rock bottom. She's traumatized, suicidal, battling addiction, and even going by the name Lilith just to escape her own identity. And there's no magical, flashy ritual to save her here. Jesus simply finds her in a tavern, holds her hand, calls her by her real name, and quotes the prophet Isaiah to her, saying he has redeemed her. As Mary later explains it, I was one way and now I am completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. It provides such a profound emotional anchor for anyone today who might be struggling with a loss of identity or feelings of absolute worthlessness. It just shows full acceptance of a person right in the middle of their darkest moments.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Absurdity of Grace and Humanity.
A really fascinating example of societal rejection in the show is the character of Matthew. The show portrays him as a mathematical genius on the autism spectrum. He's wealthy, safe behind his tax collector booth, but he is a complete societal outcast. He's considered a collaborator with the oppressive Romans, and his own people, even his own parents, despise him and spit on him. This is something that deeply resonates with today's polarized culture and the intense pressure of social ostracization, or what we often call cancel culture. Matthew is basically the ultimate canceled individual of his time.
So Jesus walks right past all the respectable people, looks directly at this despised traitor to his nation, and simply says, "Follow me." And Peter is absolutely furious. He explodes, questioning why, of all people, this traitor is chosen. And Jesus turns to Peter and delivers this simple, expectation-shattering response: get used to different. It perfectly highlights the absolute absurdity of grace. It shows exactly how difficult it is, even for the deeply faithful, to accept that a brand new beginning is offered to the people society despises the absolute most.
To conclude this explainer, we've seen how The Chosen uses plausible fiction, deep historical context, and an intense psychological focus to bring ancient history directly into our modern, complicated lives. So I want to leave you with this final thought. If the most profound stories embrace human flaws rather than erase them, and if grace and understanding can meet people in their most chaotic, broken realities, what parts of your own messy story are you still trying to hide? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking those big questions.